Welcome to the Parent Doctor podcast, where adults who are parents come to learn, lead with love, and grow. Hello, and welcome back to the Parent Doctor podcast. I'm Dr. Marissa Caudill, and today I'm going to talk to you about another topic that is a common one that parents have come to me about over the years, and that is problematic behavior, usually in young kids, although this certainly can extend into the teen years. For right now, I'm going to be focusing mainly on how to deal with this if you have young kids, like under the age of 12, who are either rude or disrespectful, not listening to you, fighting with their siblings, refusing or being defiant, acting clingy or anxious, or refusing to do things that they need to do, sleeping in your bed, all of those kinds of things. So I need to give a shout out to one of my teachers and mentors from UCLA. Her name is Cynthia Whittam. She taught me this wonderful way of thinking about all behavior that kids can do in just 3 categories. And man, I love it when something is really simple and really useful. So that's the first thing I'm going to teach you all right now in the next few minutes, is how to think of all of the things that our kids do in one of just 3 categories. This is a way we can think about all behavior. In fact, you can think about this in the way that your coworkers or office mates or employees behave. You can think about this in the way that your partner behaves. You can think about this in the way that you behave. So category 1, very simply, is the things that a person is doing that we like and that we want to happen more often. So for ourselves, maybe that's like drinking plenty of water and exercising, going for a walk in the bright sunlight every day. For our kids, maybe that's doing their homework independently, putting their clothes away, saying please and thank you. For our partners, maybe that's remembering to pick up the groceries or walking the dogs for us, taking out the trash, whatever it is. You know, there are lots of things that people do for us every day and that we do every day that are good things that we really want to commend and notice and praise and reinforce. So those category 1 behaviors are the good things, the things that we want to see more often. And what we want to do in order to make those happen even more often is to positively reinforce them. There are 2 ways in psychology that we can think of how we can shape behavior, and that is reinforcement, that's anything we do that makes a behavior more likely, and punishment, that's anything we do that makes a behavior less likely. And within those 2 big categories, reinforcement and punishment, there are subcategories of positive or negative reinforcement and positive or negative punishment. We'll talk about that more in a minute. But first, I want to give you the overview of these 3 categories. Category 2, this is the big category. This is all the things that our kids do that drive us crazy, the things that I mentioned, the reasons that parents bring their kids to see me, all the misbehavior, right? And if this goes on, and if you're really focused on it as a parent, you will start to think there's something wrong with your kid, and you will act in a stressed out way towards your child, and that will make it worse. And then you will bring yourself to a child psychiatrist because you'll be completely lost. So when we're giving tons of attention to our kids' rude behavior, disrespectful behavior, fighting with their siblings, talking back, not listening, refusal to comply, defiance, clinginess, neediness that seems, not genuine, but kind of put on, acted, all of that stuff is category 2 behavior. These are the things that we don't really like. We want these things to go away, but none of this is truly dangerous. So if your kid is swatting at their sibling or talking back or being rude, none of that is truly dangerous. The problem is we don't like it. So what do we tend to do? We tend to do what we know works to make behavior go away, which is give a punishment or a consequence. Those are punishments. In terms of those 2 big categories of ways we can shape behavior, right? We don't want to reinforce category 2 behaviors. We don't want to make them more likely. So we do what we know, which is we take something away that our child likes, or we tell them something that they want to happen is no longer going to happen because of their behavior, or we ground them, or we put them in a timeout, whatever it is. We punish them in some way. The problem is when we do that, we often end up in this sort of negative loop with our kids. We end up using punishment and consequences much too often in a way that doesn't feel good for us because we feel like we're always being put in this position where we have to be the bad guy and the enforcer. But it also doesn't feel good for our kids because they feel like whenever they get our attention and what they need from us, it's in the form of some kind of consequence. And that doesn't feel good. So the way that I help parents most is to help them to understand that category 2 behaviors, they're first of all really common. The average child, like a neurotypical normal, intelligent, normal kid misbehaves every 3 minutes. This is according to Carol Dweck, who knows her stuff. Like, she's researched all this stuff, right? So it is normal for kids to misbehave and do things that they shouldn't be doing, that we don't really want them to be doing, all the freaking time. So every 3 minutes is really a lot, right? And we can drive ourselves crazy constantly correcting that and telling them to stop it and all that. Or we can do something much better. And that's what I'm going to teach you today. Category 3 behaviors are the truly dangerous behaviors. So these are the things that we don't like, but they're also things that we cannot allow to happen. Like our kid doing something really dangerous or violent or risky. We can't let our kids run into traffic just because they're upset. We can't let them throw a ball at their sibling's head because they're angry. We can't let them, there's many things that we can't let our kids do for safety reasons, right? Those are really the only category of behavior, which hopefully happen very rarely, that we need to be punishing through consequences or removal of something that our child likes. All right, so let's just take a moment here and remind you all that if you like what you're hearing, if you want to dive in more with me, this podcast is a great start, but you're like, man, I feel like this is nice, but I want to know more. There are other ways that you can get into my community. You can be part of my weekly newsletter by going to my website and signing up. You can also join me every month. I present a live Zoom call that's broadcast on Facebook for a book. This month in May 2024, it's going to be The Whole Brain Child by Dr. Dan Siegel, which really talks a lot about this kind of stuff, about why our kids behave the way they do and how we can be mindful and thoughtful in our response to them. So it's a really great book, especially if you have kids under the age of 12. I highly recommend you hop on that call. If you join the book club officially, which you again can do through my website, you will get access to the replay of the call on the Zoom, and you will get access to an actionable PDF that I create for each book that I present. But if you just want to hop on, you can get the information on where to be at the Zoom on my website as well. All right, so continuing now with my intention for today. Again, every episode I'm going to be using Oprah's 3 questions, which are: what is my intention for this episode, what matters, and what is important. So what's my intention today? It is to increase awareness amongst all of you listeners, all of you parents, that misbehavior is normal. As I said earlier, every 3 minutes kids misbehave. It's normal. Don't panic. I also have the intention to increase your confidence that it definitely can get better. No matter where your child's at and how often they're misbehaving and whatever's happening, with consistent effort and understanding, you can make these things become less frequent over time, and you can see more of the behaviors that you do like happening to replace the behaviors that you don't like happening. But just like all things in life, change doesn't happen overnight, okay? So just as any person, regardless of how fit they are today, can become more fit a month from now, and even more fit 6 months from now, and even more fit a year from now with consistent effort, the same is true for your relationship with your kids and your kids' behavior. But nothing comes instantly, right? If you decide you're going to lose weight and you eat salad 1 or 2 days and then you're frustrated that the scale hasn't budged, is that realistic? Not really, right? And similarly, I've talked to many a parent who feels frustrated with the kinds of things that I suggest as approaches, because they'll tell me, oh, we've tried positive reinforcement, we've tried sticker charts, that doesn't work. Well, it doesn't work if you do it one time, and it doesn't work if you don't do it in conjunction with other things. Just as eating a salad does not equal a healthy body. You need to do a lot of things together to make it work. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. How do we effectively shape behavior so that we can see more category 1 behavior, less category 2 behavior, and hopefully very rare category 3 behavior over time. All right, now the second question, what matters? What matters when it comes to shaping behavior really is having a strong connection to your kids. And this means really seeing them for who they are and letting them know in their hearts that you know who they are. This is the message of Dr. Becky Kennedy with Good Inside, like letting our kids know that we know they're good inside. And this is the message of Dr. Shefali Tsabari, who says in her Conscious Parenting book, like, we need to understand that our kids are their own independent spirits and they are perfect just as they are. And that is my message as well for empowered parents, to understand that we all unconsciously and subconsciously have projected desires onto our children. It doesn't mean we're bad people. We all do that. That's part of becoming a parent. But becoming an empowered parent is recognizing that we've all done that we've projected these desires about how our kids should be, how we want them to be, the kind of child we hope to have, and that we will never get 100% of what we hoped for in our kids. But that doesn't mean that our kids are not amazing and great and just who they should be. So what we need to do as empowered parents is to change our perspective so that we can connect deeply with our kids, respect them for who they are and what they are, and help them make the most of that. Because we can't change who they are and what they are, but we can help them be the best version of themselves that they can be. And in order to do that, we really have to let them know that we see them as they are, we love them as they are, and we're there for them. And that's the connection piece. That's what really, really matters. What is important is understanding the psychology behind how we can shape behavior, understanding how to deal with the 3 categories of behavior, and practicing these techniques of bringing our conscious awareness and synthesizing it with that knowledge in the moment, in our day-to-day, so that we can bring our awareness to our interactions with our kids to build that connection. That's what's really important. Okay, so let's really dive in now and talk about positive and negative reinforcement and how we can use that to our advantage in category 1 behaviors. So let's give an example. In my household, one category 1 behavior that I like is that my 7-year-old on her own accord has started to many days, not all the days, but many days, open her little red folder that she brings home from school and see if there's any homework and bang it out. She does her little page of homework. I could just ignore that, which would be not reinforcing, right? But what I want to do, because I want to see that happening more often, is praise it. So positive reinforcement is kudos, brownie points, high five, verbal recognition. You just want to not let any of the good things that your kids do go unrecognized. And I think so often we can take things for granted, especially as our kids get older, right? We can assume that once our kid is 10, 11, 12, we shouldn't have to ask them to put their shoes away, or we shouldn't have to ask them to clear their plate from the table. While that may be true, it's also nice to thank them for doing that. So don't get into the mindset that you're somehow going to spoil your child if you recognize them for all the good things that they're doing. That is just not true, right? Can your kid ever tell you thank you, mom, or thank you, dad, too much that you would be spoiled and stop loving them? No, and the same is true for them. You cannot thank them enough for the kind things that they do for you and for the family that you would ruin them or decrease their motivation to do that. Reward and recognition goes a long way for every human being because it makes us feel seen and it builds that connection. So you cannot overdo it on positive reinforcement. My challenge to all of you listening is try to make note of how many times a day you praise your kids for things that they're doing. And be honest, like reflect at the end of the day today. How many times did I thank them or praise them? What's one thing I could have praised them for that I missed the opportunity to do so about? And try to get better at it. Try to be praising and reinforcing and thanking more often. Negative reinforcement means you are removing something that otherwise would make that likely to happen. So this is typically what we see with natural consequences, right? So for example, we kind of teach our kids to brush their teeth. That's more like positive reinforcement. But as an adult, you keep brushing your teeth, A, because it's a habit, and B, because it's negatively reinforced. You don't get cavities when you brush your teeth. We don't like going to the dentist and having our teeth drilled. So by removing that negative consequence, we negatively reinforce the habit of brushing our teeth. Same with putting on sunscreen. That is a negatively reinforced habit because when you put on the sunscreen before you go out in the sun all day, you're less likely to end up with a severe sunburn. So negative reinforcement is really sort of natural and logical consequences. It's not so much something that as parents we have to think about doing. It's something that just naturally happens. But you can use it to your advantage. Again, say you're getting in a fight with your child about whether or not they're going to wear a jacket on a chilly day outside, and your child doesn't want to wear the jacket. Well, you can just let the negative reinforcement happen and let them learn, right? they don't wear the jacket, they're going to be cold. If they come home and tell you, man, I was cold today, you don't have to say, well, I told you should have brought your jacket. You can just say, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Like, well, what do you think you can do? And let them come up with the idea that they should bring their jacket next time. That's negative reinforcement of a good behavior, which is to plan ahead so that they have what they need. Okay, so to summarize, category 1 behaviors are the things that our kids are already doing that we probably aren't noticing as often as we should, the things that we like, and we can all do a better job of recognizing these things and commenting on them, praising them, and we should. And I challenge you all to take note of those things and start doing better. Now let's get to the nitty-gritty. Let's talk about category 2 behaviors. And this is like 95% of why parents come to see me, a child psychiatrist, when their kid is having problematic behaviors. The parents are often worried that there's something deeply wrong with their child. And I think this stems from, again, our preconceived notion that a child of a certain age should behave a certain way. There's a wide variety of behavior that is normal in kids. And so you may have friends whose 8-year-old child can sit through a dinner in a restaurant quietly and stay in their seat, and your 8-year-old child may not be able to do that yet developmentally. And that may mean nothing abnormal at all about your 8-year-old child, okay? So the first thing I do with parents when they come in and they're really upset about kids' behavior is kind of normalize the fact that most likely your kid is developing at a different rate in different ways than some of their peers, but that doesn't mean that they're doomed. It doesn't mean that you need to panic. It just means that you know what they're working on and you can support them in those areas. Second is, how are the parents responding to these problematic behaviors? And usually, parents get very exasperated by their kids acting out in ways that they don't like. And they try everything they know to do, which is, they yell at their child, they lecture their child, they tell the child if this happens again, this consequence is going to happen, which is basically a threat. But here's the issue. Most of kids' misbehavior is happening in a misguided attempt to meet a need that they have in that moment. So they may either have an overactive sympathetic nervous system, an overactive fear part of their brain that is dysregulating them and making them act out because they need to feel safe. They may be tired and acting out because they just don't have control over their behavior in that moment. They might be hungry and acting out because their body is sending a signal to their brain that they need food, but because it releases like stress hormones and makes them panic, they don't have the words in that moment to tell you that they're hungry. So oftentimes kids' behavior is because of something that their body is experiencing: loneliness, anger, frustration, hunger, tiredness. And as parents, we can do a better job often of being detectives and thinking, like maybe they're feeling this way or acting this way because they're getting sick. Maybe they're feeling this way or acting this way because we skipped lunch. Maybe they're feeling this way or acting this way because we had a sleepover last night and they didn't go to bed until 2.5 hours later than they usually do. And that can help you be a little bit more compassionate in the moment with your child, to say, okay, it seems like you're having a hard time regulating yourself right now, or it seems like you're feeling really upset. The first thing we want to do, and this is in the book Whole Brain Child, Dan Siegel calls it connect and then redirect. The first thing that we want to do is connect with our child rather than coming down and saying, that behavior is not acceptable, stop it, whatever it is that we tend to do. We want to first kind of regulate ourselves, say just, oh, this is my kid and they're doing this behavior right now and that's not typical for them, and get curious about it. Just say like, I see you're feeling angry, or it seems like you're feeling really frustrated right now, or it seems like you're feeling really upset at what he said or what she did. Tell me more about that, and see if you can get them to engage the thoughtful part of their brain to talk with you about what's going on. And then basically you just don't want to reinforce the negative behavior with your attention. What you want to do is try to connect with your child to help them regulate their own brain, get their own prefrontal cortex in line so that they have some problem-solving ability, and see if you can then redirect them to a behavior or an activity that you can then positively reinforce. So let's say your kids are fighting with each other and one of them hits the other one or yells at the other one. It may be tempting in that moment to pull the child that you think is instigating or at fault aside and give them a consequence or separate them. But the better thing to do would be to say like, oh, hey, it seems like you guys are having a little bit of difficulty right now. Could I have your help with doing this other task? Or even don't even acknowledge the fighting. You can just call one of the children out and say like, oh, hey, can you come here with me for a second? I need your help with something. So you can ask them to help you. And then that basically redirects them to a category 1 behavior. Then as they're helping, you can say, thank you so much. I really appreciate them. You put them to work on some task, and then you go to the other child and you say, hey, can you help me with this thing over here? Next thing you know, both of your kids are no longer focused on each other. They're focused on a task that you've given them. They feel better because they have a purpose. You feel better because they're doing something you can praise, and everything works out. Now that said, this will not work if the escalation in either of the kids who are fighting has gotten to the point that they are like at a 7, 8, 9, 10 out of 10 intensity. At that point, they're going to need to calm down a bit, however they need to do that, in order to be able to be redirected. And I think we can all relate to this, right? When we get very intense feelings, when we're very angry, very upset, very sad, very scared, no one telling us like, oh, just come do this other thing is going to be very helpful in that moment. We have to be at kind of a medium level of intensity of our feelings for this strategy to work. So that's an important thing to recognize. And if you're interested, I have a whole video called the Feelings Thermometer Exercise and a PDF that goes with it that you can watch with your kids. And it takes I think it's about a 15-minute video, but I'm happy to share it with anyone. It's free access. Just email me or send me a message through the website and I'll get you the link. But basically what you want to be able to do is increase your kids' ability to communicate with you how distressed they're feeling in a situation in the moment. So again, to use that example, if your kids are fighting with each other and they're fighting over some toy and yelling at each other or slapping at each other, you can just say, hey, I can see you guys are upset. Like, Joey, what's your number? Susie, what's your number? That once you get this language to be able to communicate with each other 1 to 10, how intense their feeling is. If Joey's like, I'm a 10, and Susie is like, I'm a 7, then you know what you're dealing with, okay? If they're both like, I'm a 6, then you know what you're dealing with, and it's easier. And the idea of the feelings thermometer exercise is to get you to be able to have this shorthand language that your kids can communicate to you even when they're very dysregulated. They can shout out a number and have talked about beforehand when they're calm, what helps them calm down so that you'll be able to not engage with them when they're a 10 out of 10 about the behavior that's a problem. They know that their 10 out of 10 behavior is a problem, just like you and I know that our 10 out of 10 behavior is a problem, right? When our emotions are really intense, we are not our best selves, and it doesn't really help us calm down when someone we love is pointing out to us in that moment how much we are not doing well. Our kids want to do well. We have to assume positive intent from them all the time. And this is really part of the spiritual parenting, the conscious parenting. Like, if we understand they don't intentionally cause us distress, they just have less of a filter to be able to regulate their distress on their own. And that's our job as parents to teach them. But often our kids' distress triggers our distress. And that's our job as parents to recognize so that we can be empowered to handle that within ourselves first and then show up to help them. All right. Finally, we have category 3 behaviors. Let's give this scenario. You're sitting at dinner and your older child gets upset with the younger child over something and throws a fork. And it doesn't hit the younger child, but it could have hit them in the face, in the eye, in the body, whatever. That's, in my mind, a category 3 behavior, right? That's not okay, potentially dangerous. We can have whatever feelings we want to have, but we are absolutely responsible for our bodies at all times. And so in this situation, you need to be able to deliver a very, maybe not immediate, but a very close to immediate consequence for the child who has misbehaved. The younger the child, the more immediate it needs to be. So if you're in the store and a kid pulls down a rack of stuff, who knows, makes a big mess, again, that would be in my mind a category 3 behavior, because it may not be life-threateningly dangerous, but if it's something that I can't ignore, That's the key for category 2 behavior. You have to be able to ignore category 2 behavior to let it just fade away over time. That's called extinction. The approach we're taking psychologically for category 2 behavior is extinction. So you want to ignore that behavior, redirect it to category 1, and praise category 1 through reinforcement. Category 2 behaviors we want to let extinguish by ignoring those behaviors. Category 3 behaviors are either things that are frankly dangerous, like life-threatening, or they get under our skin so much that we will not be able to effectively ignore them. So if I were in the grocery store and my kid pulled down a display rack of candy because they were upset that I wouldn't buy them candy, I would not be able to ignore that behavior. That would be, for me, a category 3 behavior. So in that situation, if it were a young child especially, I would need to give an immediate consequence. In this case, it would probably be like, nope, we are going to leave the store. And so I would walk out of the store, just leave my basket, and I would just stay with my child until they were calm enough. And then we would go back in the store, apologize, and clean up the mess. Well, definitely clean up the mess. And if they were able to, we would apologize. So with young kids, they really can't hold on to misbehavior for a long time. So it's important to recognize if you have a 3, 4, 5-year-old kid, if they do something while you're out and about at the store, and then you get home and you're still steaming, but you haven't delivered the consequence, and then that night, hours later, you tell them, no, you can't have dessert because you did this in the store hours and hours before, that's going to feel very unfair to your child. Young kids can't really hold on to that. They live in the moment. So we need to make the consequence appropriate for the crime. We don't want to overreact, but we also need to have it be pretty immediate. As kids get older, especially teenagers, and it's a good thing that this is true because when teenagers misbehave, often the stakes are higher and therefore our reactions can be much bigger, right? If your teenager stole the keys to your car and went for a joyride before they'd ever had any driver's ed, that's really risky behavior, and that might make you really mad. In this situation, I do not advise immediate consequences for that behavior because you're going to be too mad. If we were talking about that 1 to 10 scale of anger, I don't know about you, but I'd probably be up there at like a 9 or a 10. And we want to be in a calm place when we're delivering consequences so that they are appropriate and fair. If you're really feeling dysregulated and upset and you don't know what the consequence should be, it's always better to just say, that was not okay. There will be a consequence. I'm not yet sure what it's going to be, but I will tell you once I have decided. And then consult with someone, consult with a friend, with a partner, with a family member about the situation and get a consensus opinion about what seems like the right way to handle that. Because it's better to wait and deliver an appropriate punishment than to be reactive and deliver an excessive punishment in the moment. Doing that really leads your kids to feel ashamed and drives a wedge between you because they'll feel both ashamed and also like what you've done is not fair. And they're probably right? When we're upset, we tend to deliver an unfair, out of proportion consequence. And especially with teenagers, this is a problem as a child psychiatrist that I've seen a lot, where parents will get into this habit of feeling overwhelmed, feeling like what they're doing isn't working because the kid's misbehavior continues. So then they get bigger and bigger with their consequences. And it just feels like this tug of war. Parents who've bought their kids concert tickets and then the night before, because they did something that the parent didn't like, they take away the concert tickets, or they give their kid a phone and then they keep taking the phone away. These are really problematic interactions between parents and kids. What we want is to have a steady sort of staircase of trust in our relationship with our kids that's building as they get older. So when it comes to big things like giving your kid a phone, giving your kid access to one of your vehicles to drive, those kinds of, those kinds of privilege, granting that level of privilege to our child should be a reflection of us having achieved together in our relationship a place of trust from which we cannot go below. So that should be something that doesn't get taken away. Same with our young kids. If we are going to let them pick their outfits for school, I don't know. It's a little harder to discern this for young children, right? They don't have as much free will. But if we're going to let them pack their own lunch or choose their snacks or pick their outfits for school, then we should let them do that. But we should only provide them the options that we feel comfortable with. The same with their food choices, right? Our job as parents is to give them foods that are okay by us, but our job is not to like stock the fridge with ice cream and stock the pantry with cookies and then yell at our kids and give them consequences if they eat those things. We want to set them up for success, not for failure. And that's really important when we're thinking about these 3 categories of behavior. All right, hopefully that was somewhat helpful. I feel like I kind of rambled in today's episode. Next week, I'm going to be talking about anxiety, which is, just the most common mental health problem that kids or adults have. But I want to give you guys a few resources, wonderful people who are experts in anxiety, and a few tips and strategies to deal with common anxiety symptoms that I have seen in kids who've come to me as a child psychiatrist. And we'll even talk a little bit about medication options and when and why I would recommend parents or kids consider those. Stay tuned and see you next week. Take care. Bye.